Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. Victoria, over to you.
Thank you for joining us today for Leadership Connect's panel discussion on navigating tribal state federal dynamics, strengthening relationships for sustainable governance. The nation-to-nation relationships between tribal nations and state and federal governments in the United States are central to understanding our history, politics, and ongoing challenges. Native American tribes are sovereign nations, and their impact is far-reaching throughout the public and private sectors. The United States has charged itself with moral obligations of the highest responsibility and trust towards Native American tribes through the federal trust responsibility. We are excited to delve into this multifaceted issue with our panelists as they offer valuable insights into the historical origins, contemporary issues, and potential paths forward. I'm Victoria Hodge, the Associate Product Manager here at Leadership Connect, focusing on our new tribal nation data. This offers in its pilot phase with select current clients and will help to foster greater connection and collaboration between and within tribal nations in the public and private sectors. We'd like to start with introductions. We have a prestigious and well-rounded group of tribal nation and federal government leaders. You are all dedicated to serving your communities. Tell us a bit about your career, your background, and why service and collaboration are important to you. Let's start with Mr. Rudy Soto, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the USDA Office of External and Intergovernmental Affairs.
Thank you so much, Victoria. It's great to be on here with all of you. And it's also great to be a part of this panel and event alongside friends, many of which I know from across Indian country. I want to just start off by mentioning a little bit about my background, as was asked. I'm a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, born and raised in Idaho. I come to this position as being the Deputy Assistant Secretary for External and Intergovernmental Affairs after having been the Idaho State Director for Rural Development, where I was able to help see the important work that we do for rural America. USDA is the only agency that has a agency that's specifically dedicated to just helping build communities literally from the ground up. And Indian country is a crucial part of rural America as a backbone of an economic resurgence in rural areas where prosperity is hard to come by more often than not, but tribes are contributing to that in a major way. In terms of the places that I've worked that I think are worth mentioning for this conversation, I worked for the National Indian Child Welfare Association in the past. I worked for the National Council of Urban Indian Health. I worked for the National Indian Gaming Association in the past. I was a member of, I was a staffer in Congress, and then also had served in the Army National Guard. So it's super exciting for me to be involved with this event that you all are having to highlight the work you all are doing to include tribes in the work that you do on strengthening relationships between governments, nonprofits, the private sector, and just the public sector, all inclusive. And more often than not, tribes are an afterthought, unfortunately. When folks are doing work across the public sector. And so this is just super exciting. And many of the folks on your Leadership Connect team know me well. I'm always excited to promote the service that you all provide in helping people track down who's working where and doing what. And it's always at our fingertips here on my team. And so just thank you so much for this event, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to Joshua Riley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Riley. I'm an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation. I'm also Cherokee by blood, and I currently serve as the Senior Federal Government Relations Strategist for the Choctaw Nation. That's a mouthful, I know. But my duties include essentially being the liaison between the Choctaw Nation and the federal government, work on policy and legislation for the Choctaw Nation, primarily in Washington, obviously. But I also do international affairs for the Choctaw Nation, working with other governments from around the world to really strengthen our sovereignty as a tribe. And then I do a lot of intertribal government relations work as well for the Choctaw Nation, working with other tribes, helping them, maybe have conversations over best practices in Indian country, what we're doing well, how we can assist them, and then joint venture projects and those sorts of things. So super excited to be here with everyone today, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Now let's turn to Fatima Abbas.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. My name is Fatima Abbas. I'm the director of the Tribal Office at Treasury. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Haudenosaunee tribe. Our role at Treasury is we manage $30 billion in direct set-asides to tribes to support their economic recovery. We're in the office of the treasurer, and the treasurer is the person who signs the money in the United States. And we are very lucky to have the first Native American treasurer, who's also chief of the Mohegan tribe, Chief Lynn Malerba, as our boss. Our office is completely new. It's the first time Treasury's ever had a relationship with tribal nations. Before Treasury, I worked at the National Congress of American Indians, working on advocacy for tribes. So we were advocating for the billions of dollars that I now implement. And then before that, I worked for tribal nations as their in-house counsel. I did a lot of economic development work. And that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Ephraim Kelly.
Hello. First, let me say it's an honor to be a part of this panel with the other folks that's on here. They're definitely more prestigious than I am, I feel like. So it's an honor. But a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Ephraim Kelly. I'm a Kiowa tribal member, and I'm currently the Natural Resource Director for the Kiowa tribe. A little bit about me is prior to, I started out in Indian child welfare as well as Mr. Soto. And so did that for some years, was social service director for a number of different tribes until 2018, which I started getting more involved. And I say that I want to say overall it's economic development for tribes, just realizing that some of the problems that the tribes I was working with were having were all very similar. And the major, to me, the biggest obstacle was revenue for the tribe. So got more involved in that, trying to diversify tribes' revenue streams. So for the past few years, I've been involved in that. And again, most recently, I started working with the Kiowa tribe and implementing a lot of the things that we felt and knew that we could do for tribes. One of the things also that we did too is travel around to the different tribes in our area, seeing what was successful, seeing what wasn't successful, and really tried to implement what we were doing or what we wanted to do from that. So the reason why collaboration is important to me is really because, I mean, we can all learn from each other, right? There's a lot of success stories and a lot of failure stories, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to say, but we can all just kind of learn from each other and grow together. And so that should, to me, that's the ultimate goal is, I think, to achieve a certain level of success. So that's the reason why I'm here. And again, I'm appreciative to be on the panel.
Thank you. And I love what you said about learning and growing together. And now we're going to turn to Sarah Smallwood.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Jane Smallwood Cock, and I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and live and reside and was born and raised here in the Choctaw Nation. And I have a helper today named Charlie. So my apologies if you hear someone crying, it's not me. But this just I think speaks to the struggles of childcare in rural Oklahoma. He gets to work with me today. But so my role with the Choctaw Nation, I've been with the nation for about 13, 14 years full time, and have worked on and off for the Choctaw Nation since I was a teenager on the summer youth programs. And my role primarily focuses now on working with our municipalities and our counties within the Choctaw Nation. We have 78 municipalities and whole or parts of 13 counties. So I officially started this role in October. So I'm out and about trying to meet all of our officials, and especially in a lot of our smaller towns, it's a revolving door of elected and appointed officials. So we're really trying to strengthen that local governance, and also encouraging our tribal members to run for office. So another part of my job is recruiting candidates, helping them be prepared to run for office. We had several who ran in 2022 for state offices, and then we had 4 candidates this last spring who ran for municipal office, and they were all elected in the spring. So we've had some success just preparing and equipping our own to serve in these roles, to serve their local communities, and to partner with the nation to move our whole area forward. I'm also locally elected as our city councilwoman here for Ward 3 in the city of Wilburton, Oklahoma, which has about 2,500 people, and it is a bigger city for the area, but by no means a big city. And another part of my role is to also facilitate executive appointments at the state and federal level for political positions. So helping our tribal leaders have a seat at the table for decisions and policy making, and everything that happens in DC on the programmatic and administrative side, as well as with the state of Oklahoma. So that's always a really fun way to work with our leaders across, over 300 departments within the Choctaw Nation. So so that's part of what I get to do, and learn something new every day in the process. So thank you all for having me on here today, and I look forward to learning from the other participants.
Thank you for joining us. And I feel like your career really is the prime example of that collaboration between local, federal, state, and tribal governments. So my first question is directed towards our tribal leaders. What goals are you striving to reach on behalf of your tribe, and how does that collaboration element play a role with local, state, and federal governments? And I'd love for you to tell a success story of something that you're most proud of. Let's start with Joshua.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. So, as you can imagine, a tribe as large as the Choctaw Nation, we have over 250,000 tribal members. As Sarah Jane was saying, our reservation is over 11,000 square miles. And so we have a lot of goals. There's a lot of things that we hope to achieve. Housing is a big push right now that we're pushing for, right? Equity in healthcare is something that we're going for right now that's real big for us. One of the things more recently is public safety and justice within Indian country. So maybe I'll just elaborate a little more on public safety and justice. After the Supreme Court decision in 2020 with McGirt v. Oklahoma, basically the Supreme Court had said that Oklahoma had been illegally exercising jurisdiction over most of Oklahoma for over 100 years. And what folks believed to be tribal jurisdiction and state jurisdiction essentially flip-flopped. And the tribes had to build out capacity. And so we took a real hard look at how do we build out that capacity? How do we hire more police officers? How do we expand our court systems? How do we collaborate with our local communities with jails and things like that to house inmates? And one of those things that was lacking to do any of that was resources, right? And so a success story, we immediately went to Congress and said, hey, you have a fiduciary a treaty and trust responsibility to provide public safety and justice on Indian reservations, and you are not doing that in eastern Oklahoma, and we need you guys to step up to the plate and take care of that. And it took a long time. It took about a little over 2 years or so to convey that message to them, get it to resonate, and then get some legislation introduced, passed and signed, and to receive the appropriations. So we were able to get a little bit of an appropriation from Congress that we split between the tribes in eastern Oklahoma so that we could increase that capacity. And so we put a lot more police officers out on the streets. We've expanded judicial systems. We've expanded public defenders' offices, prosecutors' offices. We've expanded victim services. And so we're doing a lot in that space right now, and continuing to push for expansion of services there as well. So That's one of the big pushes right now from Choctaw Nation on the, and it takes a lot of collaboration on all fronts, right? We need to work with our local municipalities. We need to work with our local counties. We need to work with the state of Oklahoma, and then we need to work with the feds. So it is a collaborative effort between all parties to expand that public safety and justice and do it the right way. So.
Thank you. It's incredible that you all were able to accomplish that. You should be proud. Let's turn to Ephraim on that question. What successes are you all proud of, and how have you collaborated with all levels of government there?
Yes, for sure. So I think you mentioned something a little bit earlier as far as kind of what our goals are. So we are a little bit smaller tribe. I think we're behind a lot in a lot of different areas. So our goals are a little bit different. Well, I say our next step goals are different. Our ultimate bigger goals are going to be the same as every other tribe. But for the Natural Resource Department, we're really trying to help our tribe right now with generating as many revenue streams as we can through different aspects of agriculture, clean energy projects, and things like that. And we're still trying to maintain our environmental stewardship as a tribe as well. And so this has required us to collaborate and work with a lot of different agencies, working with the VA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, to understand, identify, and assess all of our property so we can manage it on our own. And then working with agencies like the USDA and the Farm Service Agency to ensure that we have everything that we need to be successful there. And then as far as our energy projects, it's the Department of Energy, Department of Interior, folks like that. So we are required to, just to get these projects up and going, we're required to visit and work and see. And what we've really done with these agencies is let them know, like, hey, this is what our plan is, right? And how can you guys help us get there, right? That's really what the question that we've been asking them. Again, we're not, especially for a tribe like ourselves we have not been in agriculture in the recent past. We don't have, to my knowledge, not very many clean energy projects for any of the tribes in this area. And so developing that, seeing what that looks like, is going to require collaboration, right? And so we've been really excited to establish those relationships. As far as a success story, I would have to lean towards our agriculture arm right now, because we are doing some cool, innovative things that still, and also just define success. So I look at success as anybody. For us, a tribe that's has a goal, and we're striving towards that goal every single day, right? So to me, that makes us successful. And so with that, we have done things like go to visit with the folks in DC through the Farm Bill Coalition, and visit with them earlier this year, specifically on the 2023 Farm Bill, and what our tribe and the tribes in our area specifically could, what we kind of need, or what we feel we need to have in the Farm Bill for us to be successful with the plans that we have in place for our tribe. That worked out very well for us. And we felt like those relationships were established, our voices were heard. And so that's really been exciting for us. And so from that, we've kind of started an industrial hemp initiative for our tribe in this area. There's been a lot more tribes and outside companies and agencies who are now talking and more interested in industrial hemp based off of what we're striving to do. So to me, that's our biggest success story. And we have others, but just based off of the collaboration, what we're having to learn, who we're having to deal with, and then the partnerships that are developing around that. Again, I talked about the government agencies that we're having to work with, as well as we also have been approached by tribal colleges and some state universities that also want to help with things like carbon sequestration, like the testing of the soil to see what kind of advantages or effects, I should say, more the effects of industrial hemp and the process behind it, processing for the fiber. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of learning. So that would probably be our biggest success story. So thank you.
Thank you. And turning now to Sarah, I'd love to hear about the initiatives and goals that you're working towards over at the Choctaw Nation.
So we have really 5 prongs of a strategic plan that oversees everything every employee of the Choctaw Nation does. And so we really always have monthly check-ins, and anything we do or present to tribal council has to be connected back to one of those. So one of my big ones, obviously, is appoint Choctaw tribal members to political positions. And so just kind of on that political front, in the past 2 years, we've been very successful with getting people appointed to federal positions, and we track all of that and how many are appointed and our success rate. And I think it's just a testament to our leadership at the federal level. We've had a 100% success rate the last 2 years. And however, just due to really, I think the politics at the state level, we've had a 0% success rate. And so it's just kind of eye-opening to see that. But I got to share good news with our tribal council last week. We've had our first state political appointment in the 5 years that Stitt has been in office. So, who is our governor. So when he took office, he really championed legislation that put a lot of that political appointment power under him, and not as much with Senate leadership or House leadership. And we had one nominee this fall, and who was the nominee from not only from Choctaw Nation, but by her counterparts for the Oklahoma Rehabilitation Commission. And this statewide committee focuses on Oklahoma's disabilities, helps them connect to job resources, educational resources, anything like that. And by state statute, it's required that one person has to be from a tribal vocational rehabilitation department. So the nominee was from Choctaw Nation, and she had the support of all the 10 other tribes that have this program in the state of Oklahoma. So we went through our process with nominating her from Chief Batten and Tribal Council. And it was an ordeal because all of the people on that commission had to be appointed by the governor. And we really saw that his office called every other tribe in the state of Oklahoma trying to find another nominee besides her. But they really all banded together and said, no, this is our nominee. This is who we are as a coalition. And this is who Chief Batten is nominated as well. So we really got to see that intergovernmental partnership and the strength of our tribes working together. And, this isn't going to be the most earth-shattering, groundbreaking committee, but it is very important in advocating for our tribal members with disabilities, for the state and federal funds that come under the leadership of that committee. So she was appointed and had to be appointed by Governor Stitt for that role. And so we were really, really excited that we finally had one breakthrough at the state level. But again, I think it's just a testament to all of the tribal nations working together and those intertribal relationships that are as important, if not more important, than working with the state and federal government, because there are strength in numbers, and it truly makes a difference when we all work together. So she was our very first state political appointment that we've had, that had to go through the governor's office in 5 years to actively pursue. So we were kind of giving her a hard time in the process of, oh, what's wrong with you, but we knew it would be a hard, tough nut to crack to even attempt to pursue those. But we had the philosophy of, we have quality leaders, we're going to put them forward. We need that statewide voice. We need that tribal voice at the table. And so we're very thankful and excited that she was appointed there, but it could not have happened without partnership and support from all the other tribes.
That's so exciting. Congratulations on that as well. I'd like to turn now to Fatima to learn more about the work that you do at the Department of Treasury to collaborate with tribal nations. And I'd love to hear about some of the successes that you've had on that initiative as well.
Sure. So the core of our work, and I think similar to any federal agency, is government-to-government relationship with tribal nations, and that occurs through a formal process called tribal consultation, where any proposed federal action, we are supposed to get tribal feedback and engagement. And given that there's 574 tribes, that is a lot of ongoing engagement that we do. For our administration of recovery funds, one of the most important consultations was on a fund that we had for $20 billion, and we had to determine how to allocate that amongst 574 tribes and what kind of data to use. So we engaged in a few consultations, and tribes resoundingly requested that tribal self-certified data be used instead of census. And it sounds like common sense, right? But it actually was not common in the federal government prior to the pandemic. But during this administration, Treasury listened to tribes. We use tribal self-certified data. We also now know the count of tribal citizens in the nation. As of 2019, it was 2.6 million tribal members. Now it's gone up higher, but we allocated our funding based off of that, gave significant flexibility to tribes to determine what their economic recovery project should be. We put out a report last year, I could drop the link, but tribes engaged in over 3,000 projects, from housing construction, youth mental services, language preservation. We recently did a trip to Oklahoma and saw how Choctaw Nation is using its funds for healthcare service delivery, which also generates economic development. Osage Nation in Oklahoma was a food desert prior to the pandemic. They brought a herd of cattle with Treasury money, and then bought a meat processing facility, and are now going to have a fish farm and doing an indoor greenhouse to create sustainable agriculture. So I think all of that highlights the importance of, one, engaging nation to nation with tribes, listening to them, they know their communities best, and then creating flexible policies so that they can do the work on the ground.
Awesome. I think one thing that stuck out to me was the presence of a need for data in that space as well. I think that there, as everyone mentioned, there's strength in numbers, and that's always an impactful thing to have. I'd love to pose the question now to everyone about what challenges are most present in this space and how do you overcome them? Joshua?
Yeah, I think, for us, the the biggest challenge in this space is, for lack of better term, just ignorance, right? Many folks that we work with in Washington, D.C., they don't really know that tribes are sovereign nations, right? They don't understand that tribes are governments. And they don't understand that there are treaties between our tribes, not all tribes, but a lot of tribes, and the United States that mandate a lot of things, such as service delivery, funding for programs and those sorts of things. They don't realize, how tribes actually work. They think tribes are social organizations that people are a part of. They don't know that there's a separation of powers between, the United States and tribes, that the tribes are real sovereign nations in and among themselves, with the inherent authority of self-determination and self-governance, right? That we write our own laws. We have our own court systems. Like I mentioned earlier with police, we do all that stuff ourselves under our constitutions. And a lot of folks don't realize that. And, you work through at Washington, and you develop relationships with people, and you bring them up to speed, and they start to understand kind of, how the United States should interact with tribes, and then they leave, right? They're no longer in the administration, or they're no longer in Congress, something like that. And so then we have to start over with new people all the time. So it's always a constant learning experience, for folks as they come into either a new administration or within Congress. And then it's really a headache when administrations leave after 4 years, right? So people are literally brand new, and then they're out the door. And so we like that stability, and to have folks in long term, so that we can actually get projects done. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, really, is understanding and people knowing who tribes are and what we do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think relationship building is always that foundation for progress in every area. I'd like to turn now to Ephraim. What challenges you find you most are up against in this space, and how do you overcome them?
So yeah, Josh hit the nail on the head. I think to kind of answer that differently, I think maybe to answer on the tribe of the side of the tribe, a little bit as far as obstacles of, I guess, what we're facing here in our area at the Kiowa tribe. I can answer it the way as far as for us, it's the biggest obstacle, and I think we've solved a large part of that by what Ms. Sarah had mentioned earlier, which is having a strategic plan. So our leadership came in with a strategic plan, and it has helped us tremendously. What were told and thought that would take us 4 years to achieve, we're already probably going to achieve in year 2, right? So we're really excited about that. And so our biggest problem at this point in time, and in ensuring that these projects are coming together, I do feel like those, as we gradually progress, these relationships are going, again, like I stated before, will have to be developed because of the direction that we are going. So right now, our biggest problem is really, and agencies have to understand this too, like Mr. Riley had mentioned earlier, turnover, right? You get people within the government, they learn certain things and then they're gone. Well, same thing with the tribe too. And you see a lot more, I feel like, probably within the smaller tribes, right? A lot of turnover. So currently for our tribe, we're not fully staffed. We have multiple key positions that we're not having staffed right now. So we don't have really the capacity to function at our best of our ability. Another thing I think is that is an obstacle for us in our area is our work culture, right? We have to change our mindsets with the folks that work within our offices too. And again, these collaborations as we grow, learning from these different agencies, these different tribes will help with that work culture and knowing what is possible. One thing again is there's a lot of tribes I feel like that when they are brought an idea or a project, a lot of them don't know what is possible. They don't know what other tribes have done. And so they feel like it's a huge obstacle when they can just go down the street or go down to maybe down the road, talk to somebody who's done it, who's been there, and get to where they need to be. So I think developing the right attitude on both sides of the agencies as well as the tribes, I think is key. Having that winning mentality, a culture, a state of culture of winning and understanding that things are possible. And then as well as just continue those, to me, once you have a strategic plan, like they stated earlier, you know where you're going, you know what every agency you're going to have to deal with, right? At some form of level. And then at that point in time, it's just connecting with them, right? And so to me, for us, our tribe, that's our biggest obstacle right now, is those items. But we hope to eventually soon get to the obstacles of what the Choctaw Nation are dealing with, right? And a lot of the things that they're getting into that they mentioned, we're right behind them, or that they're already in, we're right behind them trying to develop. So again, collaboration is key, and understanding and visiting will, for our area, elevate our knowledge and experience to do more and better things.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Fatima for that same question, from the perspective of someone who's worked on the tribal nation side and now also on the federal government side. What challenges do you most see and face in this space, and how do you overcome them?
Sure. So I've been definitely lucky to work for 2 very different tribal governments. One has the most senior water right on the Colorado River, and anyone who knows water out west, it's liquid gold. And then I worked for another tribe that is landless, was terminated and restored, and is in 2 national forests in California. And so it showed that there's a significant diversity of needs amongst tribes, and trying to translate that into national policy is very challenging. It's what we have to do in the federal government when we're engaging in rulemaking. We're looking at tribes that might have 5 people to tribes that have over 500,000 tribal citizens, and trying to balance the equities. And you see it most starkly when there's funding available, and maybe you see a low subscription rate for funding. When I came into Treasury for one of Treasury's funds, there's about 150 Alaska tribes that hadn't applied, and there was a deadline that was coming due in about a week. And as somebody's worked in-house for tribes, I refuse to believe that tribes would decline money that they need, especially in a pandemic. So I pushed for an extension. Thankfully, Treasury granted it. And what we discovered was pretty simple. The tribes hadn't applied because the application was online, and they're in villages that are only accessible by water or sea. So they couldn't apply when they don't have internet. So we worked with tribal organizations to fly out in helicopters to some of these villages, and we were able to get 100% application rate from all Alaska villages. But I think it illustrates, the challenges of working with tribes of varying needs, but the importance of serving each tribal nation. The federal trust and treaty responsibility is to each individual tribe, and just the importance of persistence and working through the bureaucracy, because ultimately we are public servants and we run up against barriers just as those run up against barriers on the outside. But I think it's important to remember why we're here.
Thank you. And I think it also exemplifies the need to target your approach depending on who you're speaking with and who you're trying to reach out to. Sarah, I'd like to ask that same question to you, especially as someone who has that experience on the state and local level of government.
I agree really with everything that has been said already. Turnover is always a huge issue. We see that with administration changes at the state level with the governor and leadership there, as well as just other independently elected state offices. And then just also with the turnover in the state legislature. We, by and large, have a fantastic working relationship with members of the state legislature. We have several tribal members from the Choctaw Nation who are in leadership in the state Senate in particular, and we're always trying to get more of our people elected to represent our area and to run for office. I will say personally, one of my state senators here consistently votes against everything that the nation supports at the state level, which is very frustrating for me as a tribal member and a constituent. And so we're always trying to actively look for our own to run for office, so we have that voice. And I think that's part of one of the challenges, is that we are so remote, we are so far removed from Oklahoma City. It takes 3 to 4 hours to even get to Oklahoma City, much less anywhere else in Oklahoma. That, again, I think kind of what I said on our prep call, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so to physically be there, to be in the room, to be a decision maker is so important. And that's why we have such an emphasis on encouraging our tribal members to run for office and to be prepared for the office to serve once they're elected. And just to be in the room where it happens. It truly makes a difference. I was in a program just a couple weeks ago for municipal officials from around Oklahoma, and from our whole reservation area, all 78 municipalities, I was the only one there. And again, it's because of the difficulty, the time, the expense, the travel. It took me 5 hours to get to that one meeting. And so I was glad to be there and an honor to be there. But that's a huge challenge, I think, for a lot of Indian country. It's just how rural and remote and far away we are from Washington, D.C. or the state capital, or wherever it is that makes a difference. So that's I think just a testament, though, to leadership at the federal agencies right now. Like Fatima said, they were in Oklahoma a few weeks ago. It truly makes a difference when officials come to your reservation, come to see you, and you know that you truly have that relationship, and it truly makes a difference. And so we're always trying to invite people to come see us, have field hearings, whatever from that perspective. Because it truly makes a difference to make those connections in your location and to see the challenges at hand of where you are. And I know I'm fortunate. I live right in the middle of the Choctaw Nation, so I'm in the heart of the nation, as our tribal councilwoman says. We're right in the middle, so I'm able to work remotely from my home and be wherever I need to be in about 2 hours or less for the most part. But even just driving from one end of our reservation to another can take up to 4 hours, depending on where you start and where you end. So those physical challenges can be policy challenges as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to turn this question to all of our panelists. What excites you most about the future of this space, and what does a radically reimagined future look like where the U.S. federal government engages meaningfully with tribes in government decision-making? Let's start with Fatima.
I think at Treasury, we're particularly passionate about supporting the development of tribal economies. Federal policy historically was focused on the dismantling of tribal economies, so it takes targeted federal policy to reverse that. And we've seen just over the past few years, how well tribes have done with managing the economic recovery funds. We did a visit to Virginia tribes. One tribal nation was in a health desert. The local clinic was like 100 miles away. They used their treasury money to to build a local clinic, and now they're the largest healthcare provider, and they also tripled their employment. And so I think it showcases the leveraging tribes are doing of federal investments, and I think that's one of the exciting pieces of the Biden administration is there's all this money flowing, but it's not just one-time use, because tribes are investing for the next 7 generations. So that's exciting.
Ephraim, what excites you most about the future?
She said a lot of what I wanted to say, which is so to me, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of different, not just our government. You look at the tribes across the board. There's a lot of things that have worked. There's a lot of things that have been successful. There's a lot of things that our government got right. There's a lot of things that they can do better, correct, improve. And I think that it is valuable for them to look to some of the tribes that have been successful in those spaces. I think that, to me, moving forward, it would be good to see tribal governments be at the table to help facilitate moving forward a cohesiveness, of tribal government, state government, federal government. So to me, that's what the best case scenario would be in my mind. And I think that's pretty simple for me, is just that the government, our federal government, again, looking towards tribes to get certain things that they can improve, that tribes are doing correctly now.
Thank you for that. I think that ties into that seat at the table statement that Sarah made a little earlier. Sarah, now to you. What does that future look like for you, and what are you most excited about?
Well, I know there's still barriers in this realm, but I think just through the federal government and state government for open meetings, allowing for internet access, it just increases our access to have a seat at the table. So many, different advisory committees or anything that allow for public comment, even if you're not a formal member, are now available online, where we typically haven't had that, even 3-4 years ago. Again, it just kind of brings the government to the people and the people to the government. And so it's still not the same as being there in person, but it makes, I think, a world of difference by just bridging that gap. Obviously, broadband and that infrastructure is continually being strengthened to provide for that. But I've already seen just huge strides that we can make by having those seats at the table and by having that immediate access that really bridges those physical boundaries and those physical challenges of us being remote and hard to, I think I live close to an airport now, and I'm an hour away from one, and to even fly to go somewhere. And so just being able to, to have Zooms, to have things like this is, I think, really exciting to see what relationships and partnerships can be made, in an instant that used to take days or weeks before.
Definitely. It's exciting. And I think it also speaks to the broadband access that we've mentioned earlier on this call. Joshua, what about for you? What are you most excited about for the future of the nation-to-nation relationships, and what does that future look like?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that kind of go hand in hand together here. Over the last several decades, the relationships with tribes and the federal government have gotten stronger and stronger. There was a time when we were facing termination, there was a time when we were facing termination literally as in being killed, right? And then there was a time not too long ago, when maybe my parents' or grandparents' generation, when tribes were facing termination as far as like a relationship with the United States, right? The United States no longer recognizing tribes as sovereign governments. And I think those days are behind us, except for maybe a few politicians, without getting too political here. I think we had a previous president just a few years ago who was trying to take us back to those termination policies. and this current administration is going the complete opposite direction. I think those relationships that we've been able to build over the last few decades have really propelled us in a direction where there's more understanding, and as the future, as we get closer, those relationships are going to continue to materialize into a better understanding of who we are and what we do. And so I think part of that is also the youth, right? Folks in the United States now are growing up with a better understanding of what tribal nations are, who tribal people are, with more respect for our histories and our cultures, and the sovereignty of our tribes. And so I think, again, without getting too political, as we see America becoming more progressive, the relationship with the tribes and the United States tends to fare better, if that makes sense. So that's what excites me the most about the future and what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you. So we have a lot of audience questions coming in, but I think one common thread throughout a lot of them is people asking for advice. It sounds like people both on the tribal side, but also on the federal or state government side are looking for some ways that they can effectively coordinate and effectively collaborate. So I'd love if we could all give a piece of advice that you might offer to someone who's new to this and trying to get involved. Let's start with Fatima.
Sure. I think I know there's some questions about state assistance and federal assistance. I think, if your state doesn't have a formal relationship with tribes, it can always create one. I mean, a lot of the development that you've seen in California, North Carolina, and some of the other states has been because of state employees working with the tribes in their respective regions. So it encouraged that. With regard to the federal government, I think our contacts are definitely hard to find. Folks are welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn if there's specific questions. But I would reach out if there are, if you have programs that benefit tribes that you think there's an opportunity to collaborate with another agency. I think that's definitely a room where we can always improve on in the federal government. So I would definitely welcome outreach to discuss further opportunities for us to promote funding opportunities for tribes.
Thank you. Sarah, what advice do you have?
I think my advice is just to approach anything with an open mind and an open heart, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, I literally learn something new every single day. And I know I personally, even just here living and working in Oklahoma, when I went to college 20 years ago, I had never met really anyone who wasn't Choctaw. And so everyone I knew who was a tribal member was Choctaw. And so when I went to Oklahoma State University, just getting to learn about the other tribes around Oklahoma blew my mind, because Oklahoma history doesn't teach tribal history in Oklahoma. So I knew about the 5 tribes in Choctaw Nation, and that was about it. And so that just opened my eyes so much to what all of our other tribes in Oklahoma do, their cultures, their histories, their governance. And I mean, this world is just wide open of policy in Indian country, because we are so unique and so different, but still have those common threads. And so I think that's one of my favorite parts of this job, is just getting to meet people from all over and just learning. And I will say, people in Indian country have warm hearts. They're willing to talk to you. They'll probably give you a hard time and tease you a lot in the process, but that means they like you. And so just by having that openness and that willingness to learn, I think goes a long way and can truly make a difference. And just, brings that sharing of knowledge that makes us all stronger.
Thank you, Sarah. Ephraim, what advice do you have?
Thank you. So to me, Fatima would be a perfect example, I think, of what we need. She has worked for several different tribes, and now she's working for an agency. So the U.S. Department of Treasury can go to her and really lean on her expertise, because Sarah had mentioned it. We've all mentioned it, and a lot of it is lack of understanding of tribal governments, right? So to me, that is a key for us. I visit with a lot of agencies and a lot of companies, that don't have tribal liaisons. They don't have someone who can coordinate, that understands the coordination. Again, with tribes, everyone, I think by now we should understand to be patient, be persistent with tribes, right? Tribes move, well, all governments move at a little bit slower pace, I think, than what the business world or other outside entities probably operate at. So having somebody that can bridge that gap, right, of maybe speeding the tribe up a little bit, but at the same time allowing them to be the tribe, and then maybe slowing down the agency, right, and understanding, hey, these are the things that the tribe has to work through. But that knowledge, I think, to me is the key. And I know there's several nonprofits, there's several consulting companies, there's several, I'm sure, just tribal leaders who'd be willing to offer their services for these, right? But I definitely think it's, to me, my best advice is to fill that gap. We need the proper people to bridge that gap.
Definitely. I think knowledge of that space and that cultural competence is really key there. Joshua, do you have any advice for anyone entering the space who might not know how best to interact and relate to tribal nations or to the federal government side?
Sure. Certainly. Just, my advice is always, reach out to tribes, right? Reach out to the tribes that are in your area. If you don't have tribes in your area, do some research and, see if there's a tribal liaison that's available, or you can always find consultants. So a lot of folks that are in that tribal consulting space, they'll let you know. They're easy to find. So you can always try to find a tribal consultant and say, hey, I want to engage with Indian country, and I need help doing so, and can you be that bridge for me? And folks will generally oblige and do that for you. So that would be my advice. First reach out to your local tribes and ask them how best to engage with them.
Thank you. I think it all starts with that first reach out in some ways. So one question we had actually before the panel that came in from the attendees registration list was about land management, ecologies, and natural resources. So Ephraim, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the work you do on natural resources for your tribe.
Yeah, we're behind in a lot of tribes, so we're doing a lot of initiatives. We're starting our farming and ranching. We're starting our energy projects. We're getting more environmental projects started. One thing that we've also been doing is leveraging certain federal grants to create economic development or revenue opportunities. For example, there's one in particular, a solid waste management grant that we have that required the tribe to contract out and utilize roll-off bins. So what we did is we developed a proposal for the tribe to purchase these roll-off bins themselves, so we can start renting them for ourselves. So instead of us going to an outside company, we're renting them straight from the tribe, and the tribe is able to create an additional revenue from the federal dollars that we already have set aside for this. We're doing that with quite a few different, quite a few of our programs. We have that company type arm to generate some revenue from that, to keep everything in-house, to make sure we're sustainable and self-reliant upon ourselves. And so we're also doing, again, environmental programs as well, new programs like the Orphan Well project, a program that through the Department of Interior. And so again, that's going to be something that allows us to be stewards of the environment, ensure that we're taking care of our environment, but at the same time, the goal for that is to be an 8A company to contract out with other tribes and other agencies, particularly the BIA, who has to manage federal property, right, for tribes. So they're all going to need to have this arm or this company, a company, to come clean these up. So we're looking at developing the relationships with our local BIA agency to make sure that we're the company to work those projects for them. So ensuring doing things like that, again, farming and ranching, diversifying our crops. The Choctaws mentioned something earlier as well. Fatima mentioned tribes doing meat processing, right? So we're getting involved in that too. We're developing our farming and ranching. We're getting into eventually buffalo, and then getting into meat processing as well, just because we know it's a huge opportunity, not just for our tribe and our tribal businesses, but for the local economy. I believe that we visited other tribal meat processing plants, and they were servicing 70 and somewhere up to 80% non-native entities, right? And so in our area, we're looking at the same thing. There's a lack of meat processing, so we're just looking to solve all the problems in our area and be involved in our local economy, right? Farming and ranching, oil and gas, all things that are prominent in the southwest portion of Oklahoma, and we haven't been involved in them. So our natural resources department is trying to ensure that we do that. Again, managing our own property, we had to develop a close relationship, and still developing a close relationship with our Bureau of Indian Affairs to identify and manage all of our property. They've been a huge help to us, and hopefully, again, we can return that and be a huge help to them once we are established with what we have, what we're planning to have going on.
Thank you. And for Fatima, what advice do you give to federal agencies that are hoping to meaningfully engage with tribal communities?
For federal agencies, I think engaging with tribal organizations is key. At Treasury, we only have a team of 4 folks in our tribal office. And so for us to be able to do so much engagement with tribes, it's key that we work with tribal orgs. There's ones at the national level, like the one I worked for, NCAI, but there's numerous ones at the regional level. I was actually typing an answer to somebody's question when you called on me. For Michigan tribes, there's the Midwest Alliance of Tribal Sovereign Nations. They're a great resource for connecting with tribes on federal and state funding opportunities. So strongly encourage reaching out to tribal orgs.
Thank you. And for our last few minutes, I'd love to just go around and give closing remarks. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us all with in this conversation about navigating these nation-to-nation dynamics between tribal nations and our U.S. federal and state governments? Let's start with Sarah.
I'll just say thank you all for having me and inviting me to be part of this conversation. I think just having the conversation is a step in the right direction. And I heard someone say the other day, we're in the business of relationships. And I think that's very true. My husband likes to tease me that I like to go to a lot of lunches and have coffee with people a bunch. And that's what I do for a living. And it may be true, but it's all for a greater purpose of finding that common ground, seeing how we can work together, you know, and sharing who we are as a Choctaw people and how we can connect. And I think, again, just having that open door and that willingness to even have that conversation or willingness to even see how we can work together is a huge step in the right direction. And I know I've learned a lot just from this call today, and just even points of things I've jotted down, how I can connect further in the future with the panelists here. So I think just by sharing that, sharing our hearts, sharing the work, sharing the accomplishments and the challenges, we can all move forward. So I think those are just my closing remarks of thank you all, and thank you for the work that all the other panelists do to serve Indian country.
Thank you, Sarah. Ephraim, what closing remarks might you have?
So I'll just reiterate having some form of tribal liaisons to understand those relationships and understanding tribal government, and then also having platforms like this so we can share this information. I've discussed multiple times with tribal leaders that, hey, we need to get a podcast or something going so we can start having these open discussions. I've worked with some folks with the Chickasaw Nation, and I asked them, hey, could you ask Governor Anatubby if he'd be willing to get on a podcast and talk about these specific topics, right? And I went from something as simple as, again, innovation and diversifying his crop, right, to potentially him, what his thoughts were against it, to, again, hey, the Pentagon announced that we have aliens. How does that affect your decision making, right? These are all things that are true things that affect our government decisions, and would love to start having these conversations because, again, until we start having open conversations about what we're doing and how to get that done, we have really no clue of what we're all capable of. And so having that knowledge and experience, sharing it with each other, and again, having a platform that we can all engage on, I think would be the biggest takeaways.
Definitely. I think relationship building conversations, it's also important. Fatima, what about you? What are your closing remarks?
I think the importance of education, which I think this panel provides a forum, but also self-education. So all of us, the work that we do, we are largely self-taught. When you work in tribal affairs, you have to grow across so many subject areas. And I think there's always imposter syndrome where you feel like you don't know enough. It's okay. We're never going to know everything. And I think just starting. So if you don't work in tribal affairs, educating yourself about the tribes in your local area, there's probably opportunities to plug in there and support them. So I think no step is too small.
Thank you. And finally, Joshua.
Thank you. I kind of alluded to it earlier. Kind of the most important thing for me and the biggest takeaway I want for folks, to come away with, is really the understanding that tribes are governments. We are sovereign nations. We are not the United States. We are not the states that we may or may not reside in, or that are around us, I guess I should say. We existed prior to every state. We existed prior to the United States. And we have a very unique relationship now with the United States because of that. Federal courts have said that we have existed long before the United States, and therefore we are sovereign in of ourselves apart from the United States. And so, I mentioned that earlier as we were talking, and I just want to mention that again for folks who maybe have no idea about Indian country. Maybe this is your first time, you tuned in today, and this is the first thing that you're hearing about, federal, state, tribal dynamics, and why tribes do the things that we do. We've been called special interest groups, before, and that's highly offensive. We're obviously not a special interest group. We are a government of people that have existed, here in this land since time immemorial. And so I just want folks to understand that we are sovereign nations. And so the reason that there are federal programs that pertain to tribes is because of treaties that we've signed with the United States, and that trust responsibility that the Supreme Court has mandated the United States to take towards tribal folks. And so we are not race-based organizations, as some folks would lead you to believe that, some of these federal programs, they'll say they're illegal because they are only for a certain race of people. But in fact, tribes are not races of people. We are governments, right? So we have a political governmental relationship with the United States. And in fact, our tribes are made up of people of all races. Some tribes have people who are not Indians by blood, right? They have been adopted or have otherwise became members of these tribes. And so, there's a lot of dynamics, with that, but really just understanding tribes are sovereign nations. And, that's why we do the things that we do, and we interact in the spaces that we interact. And these things such as healthcare, education, natural resource policy, public safety and justice. That's why these things are so important to us, because we are governments and not social organizations. So I'll leave you all with that. And it's been a pleasure being a part of the webinar today, and thank everybody, all my fellow panelists, for assisting, and thanks to everyone who joined in today.
Thank you, Joshua. And I will reiterate that. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your insights. I think we can all say that we learned something today. And I want to also thank our attendees for being so engaging and asking really smart questions. So thank you all. And I hope you will join us again for our next webinars.